is Jennifer, and I'm here with Vanessa.
Hello.
And we're going to talk to you about two artworks today, but we're going to start with a sculpture called The Age of Maturity by Camille Claudel.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this sculpture go by another name as well?
Yes, it often goes by the name The Age of Maturity, but it is also known as The Path of Life.
And in what year was this piece created by Claudel?
Well, the commonly accepted dates are 1893 to 1900, although some would say that the piece wasn't completely finished until 1902 or even 1903.
Now, why is that?
Claudel had a difficult time getting this piece recognized by the Artistic Society in Paris. At first, the state was slow in paying her the advance she was promised, but what added to this waiting period was Rodin's reaction to the piece, which we will discuss further in a moment.
So, why the discrepancy between the completion date?
It took about 4 or 5 years for Claudel to find a sponsor to help bronze the plaster.
Okay, let's talk about the relationship then. Rodin committed his life to another woman prior to meeting Claudel. Is this correct?
Exactly. That woman's name was Rose, and she was a rather sickly older woman, in comparison to Claudel, who was 24 years Rodin's junior. Initially, I think Claudel expected Rodin to abandon Rose, but this never happened. So Rodin worked hard to split his time equally between the two women. Claudel became increasingly jealous, though, as Rodin started working with other female models. In 1892, she actually moved out so they could get space from one another, and the relationship officially ended the following year.
And around the same time, she started working on The Age of Maturity.
Yeah, I guess you could say that she actually used The Age of Maturity to reconcile the years she had wasted on Rodin.
Alright, so tell me about the first time he witnessed the piece then.
Rodin actually didn't see The Age of Maturity until a year after the plaster was completed, in 1899, when Claudel exhibited it at the Salon.
Is this because she hid it from him on purpose?
Yes, because this was such a personal work for both of them. I think Claudel was afraid of Rodin's personal reaction to the piece, so she tried to prolong it as much as possible.
And was Rodin's reaction anything like she anticipated?
Yes, on some level, but I think his resulting reactions were probably harsher than she could have imagined. A year later, at the 1900 Universal Exhibition, The Age of Maturity was actually rejected, and as a result, Camille Claudel completely withdrew herself from the exhibition, which, interestingly enough, displayed 136 of Rodin's works. So I think it's safe to say that he used his influence to bar Claudel from ever showing The Age of Maturity again. Up until this point, Claudel and Rodin actually retained some semblance of a friendship, as they were equally matched rivals in the field of sculpture. However, once Rodin started soaking up the fame and fortune that should have belonged to Claudel, I think the friendship pretty much dissolved completely.
Now, I know a lot of people read Rodin's and Claudel's relationship into The Age of Maturity. Is that a fair assessment of the piece, or is there some deeper meaning to it?
There's definitely a universal interpretation for this piece. The three figures represent three specific things. At the center you have man, who bears a striking resemblance to Rodin. Above him hovers the representation of old age, and behind those two figures is youth, who is reaching out to man. Obviously, though, there is a connection between this group of figures and Claudel's personal life, as the three can also be made to represent Rodin, Rose, and Camille Claudel herself.
Now, that gap between their hands takes me back to the gap between God and Adam on Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel.
Interestingly, connection that you make there. It makes me almost want to jump in and push their hands together because they're so close, they're almost touching. But you can definitely see a shared sense of apathy between Michelangelo's representation of Adam and Claudel's figure of man.
Speaking of Michelangelo, the next piece of art that we are going to address is a sculpture titled La Pieta by Michelangelo.
So tell me, Vanessa, what years was this piece completed, and wasn't Michelangelo pretty young when he completed it? That's pretty impressive.
Yes, it is, Jennifer. In fact, Michelangelo was only in his 20s when he completed this piece, and he completed it in the years 1498 to 1500.
Okay, so what exactly does the title of the piece mean, and what does it represent?
Okay, so La Pieta means pity or compassion, and it's an intimate representation of Mary sorrowfully contemplating the death of her only son, Jesus, whom she is holding in her lap. Although such a work may not have been characteristic of Michelangelo, In his book titled Michelangelo, Rolf Schott describes Michelangelo as one who did not easily admit others into his intimacy and could be harsh, rude, and impatient to the point of intolerance. However, one must not form a one-sided assessment of him as a person. Deep within him lay tenderness and humility, and we can see that very much in this sculpture.
Wow, now that's something to consider. Okay, so let's look at that marble. It looks so real.
Great observation, Jennifer. Michelangelo decided to take marble and made it look so lifelike that the figures of Mary and Jesus look like they were sculpted with flesh. The folds of drapery, like Mary's clothing, and the way that skin protrudes and is stretched, gives this sculpture that much more resemblance to real life. There is this reality of Jesus' death on the lap of a living Mary. His lifeless body looks simply vulnerable and just void of life as he is stretched across Mary's lap. This use of marble as the medium for this work really helps create a more lifelike image. Jesus' body just lacks resistance, and yet Mary seems to be full of resistance as she attempts to hold Jesus. There is this greater perception of weight on Mary's body, and the folds of skin of Jesus adds to that weight as he exerts his weight on Mary.
But Mary doesn't seem to have much trouble holding Jesus up. In fact, her body position and facial expression don't seem to show at all that she's carrying the weight of another human being.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. The main website of St. Peter's Basilica describes that as she holds Jesus' lifeless body on her lap, the Virgin Mary's face emanates sweetness, serenity, and a majestic acceptance of this immense sorrow, combined with faith in the Redeemer. However, Mary's face does not even seem to fully comprehend the weight of the moment, the fact that her son Jesus is dead. In fact, her facial expression does not even seem to show any effort of holding up another person at all. She has this look of peace, however slightly blended with depression.
Yes, I think her expression is a peaceful one, with a little bit of sadness mixed in. Do you think it might be that she is at peace with the fact that her son is gone?
I think that she is at peace with the fact that, as hard as it might have been to lose her son, he died for a noble cause, love, and what better way to be remembered?
Exactly. I think that Michelangelo sent a message that is loud and clear with an image that is so peaceful and still.
I think you have a lot of reason, Jennifer.
All right, everybody, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. We hope you enjoyed the discussion.
Bye.